So hey everyone, I'm Alan Coates. I'm the Forest Water Quality Specialist at the North Carolina Forest Service. AJ Lang is also attending today. He helped me put this presentation together and is my co-lead on this project. He is the Watershed and Conservation Staff Forester here at the Forest Service. So today I'm going to be talking about how we've been using GIS to see how forest operators are using BMPs around the state. And the two of us are representing the North Carolina Forest Service today. So as an agency, the Forest Service provides all kinds of services for the public, and that includes wildfire response, logging inspections, managing properties like tree nurseries and state forests, as well as many other services for the 13.6 million acres of state and private forest land in North Carolina. As you can see on the map, we have an office in every single county in the state, as well as several district and regional offices that cover sections of the state, and a central office in Raleigh. So AJ and I are here in the central office working out of the Water Resources branch. And as a branch, we mainly provide technical assistance on water-related issues to our staff around the state, as well as to landowners, foresters, loggers, and anyone else who needs our help. We also take part in research, training, and collaboration with external partners. So the primary way that forestry operators protect water quality while doing their work is through the use of best management practices, or BMPs. So these are effective and practicable methods to prevent or reduce non-point source pollution to a level compatible with water quality goals. And there are around 400 individual practices that you could use depending on your needs at a particular site. We've written up all of them in the BMP manual, which is shown on the right, or the Big Green Book as we call it. Now these practices are not mandatory, but when they're used correctly, they'll help to control and capture runoff, reduce soil erosion, and filter excess nutrients. So one of my projects is to assess how operators are actually using those BMPs in the real world. In order to do that, we go out to operations and look for opportunities to implement any of those 400 practices found in the manual. And as we walk around a site, we look for active or, we ask a series of yes or no questions regarding the observed methods used to protect water quality. So again, just any best management practices that we see or don't see in different locations around the site. We're looking for active or recently completed sites that contain some kind of water feature because we think that that approach will give us the best idea of what people are using in the moment and how they relate to actual water quality risks in reality. And then every few years, we complete a round of these surveys, usually a couple hundred of them, and then we write up the results in a report like the ones on the right-hand side of the slide. And we can use those results to see which BMPs are most effective in protecting water quality, how implementation changes over time, and where we may need to focus our educational efforts in the future. So for example, during these surveys, we look at these features called Streamside management zones, which are similar to riparian buffers, which you may be more familiar with. And while we're in the field, if we come across one of these, we would answer questions like the ones at the bottom of the slide. So we ask the question, is this BMP, is this practice properly implemented, yes or no? And then, is there a risk to water quality related to this practice, yes or no? So what we want to see is that they have properly implemented that practice and that there is no risk to water quality. And as we gather that data and when we're analyzing the data, we can use that to produce graphs like the one on the right, which tells us the likelihood of a water quality risk for a given SMZ width. So that's just one example of how we use this information. This time around, we've added another component to this round of surveys. So my colleague AJ has been researching soil movement on stream crossings. Now, these are usually the most vulnerable areas on a forestry site because you have you have a disturbed area that's very close to a stream. So in the picture below, that would be the area outlined in red. That's a trail that they use to move equipment around the site. And you can see the slope coming down towards the stream where the photographer is standing. So we wanted to be able to estimate this sort of sediment movement near streams and how much proper BMPs might be reducing that movement. And we're using the universal soil loss equation, or USLE, to help us find that estimate. So we started this current round of surveys in 2018, and we decided to make some changes compared to previous rounds. The primary change is that we moved from using Microsoft Access forms inside these Panasonic Toughbooks to using smartphone apps like Survey123 and Collector. And this allowed us to do a few different things. So first, we can have smarter survey forms that let us calculate things like sedimentation for AJ's project. Also, when you're trying to cover every corner of an 80-acre harvest in the mountains, it's a lot easier to carry smartphones around than it is to carry kind of a bulky, essentially a laptop. And ultimately, making this change, this new technology, allows us to have more information at our fingertips instantly in the field. So basically, we've used advances in GIS to improve our process. We're moving from trying to wrangle information from a lot of different sources to something that is much simpler and much more seamless. So now I'm going to walk through our new process to give you an idea of what it looks like. The first step, of course, is to find sites to visit. In North Carolina, we don't have any kind of harvest notification system, so we have to find jobs on our own or hear about them from those in the industry. So for the past few years, at least in our branch, we've been analyzing Landsat satellite imagery in order to find sites. And that requires using GIS to go from the raw imagery in order to find output polygons that have a high likelihood of being actual operations. So in the last round of surveys, we did some of that analysis in order to find sites. However, one complicating factor is that there are 13 separate Landsat tiles or images that cover North Carolina. So what I had been doing is that I turned that analysis workflow into a model in ArcGIS ModelBuilder that would do part of the process for me. But if I wanted to cover the whole state, I would have to run this 13 times, once for each tile or each image. And that includes changing the file names, removing and updating the input rasters. And if I messed up anything, I had to start over and delete the intermediate files that had been wrongly created. And after that, I still had to sort the outputs and get them into the formats I wanted so that, so that I could use them out in the field. So for the current round, we decided to make the change and take advantage of the ArcPy toolbox. So I created a Python script that would run all of those tiles together for the entire state and also do all of the post-processing that I mentioned. I can actually run this script without even opening ArcMap or Pro. So it greatly reduced the amount of time needed to find sites, and it removed many of the opportunities for human error. So I just run this once a quarter, and it gives me as many sites as I could want all over the state. So once we have those sites, it's pretty easy to throw those into the web map that we use within our ArcGIS Online organization. So this web map also contains all of the reference layers we need, plus feature services that provide us with information like soils and parcels. So after we put those new sites in, we're ready to go out into the field. And I also created a couple of offline maps that have most of the same information that we can use if we end up in an area without good data coverage. So we've been using the Collector app, Esri's Collector app, on the left to draw an outline of the tract as we kind of walk around it. We can also draw in features. We can add pictures of things we see connected to a spatial location and immediately send it up to the cloud. So we just draw an outline of the tract and then collect attributes for that specific tract using the reference layers that I put into the web map. Then I configured a pop-up using a custom URL scheme so that when we hit that link that says click to begin survey, it launches the Survey 123 app, and all of those attributes are populated into our survey form. This is just another look at the forms that we've been using. So we have one form for the BMP Implementation Survey, which allows us to quickly answer all of those questions as we encounter practices in the field. Then we have another one that we use for the erosion events. And in this one, we built in a calculator that allows us to, assess each slope and receive an instant estimate of sedimentation. So you can see that over on the right side under this A value. So we're finishing up the current round of surveys next week, hopefully, but we'll continue to use GIS as we move into the next phase of analyzing the results and producing a report. One of the ways that we'll do that is to create story maps that accompany the report, like this one that we made to go along with the last report. And again, the nice thing is that we already have the data we've collected in ArcGIS online, so we won't need to do as much work to get the data into these kinds of projects. Of course, we'll also be making some static maps to go into the next report, which will come out sometime next year. Now, with the collector app being retired soon by Esri, we'd like to move everything to Survey 123, and I think we can do that. We're also looking into ways to auto-populate attributes by simply pointing to our current location. So that would look like kind of an automatic spatial join. So right now we're looking into ways to do that. Yeah, so I believe that's all I had. Please feel free to contact us anytime, either myself or AJ, if you have any questions about this project or about how we've used GIS, or any ideas that you'd like to share.